Okay, two things, please. Turn your cell phones or put them in silence mode. Question number one, where does the name CANCUN come from? Nest of ants, nest of lizards, nest of snakes, or number four, I don't know. Press your answer, please. Music will last for 10 seconds. Please don't start dancing. Please check your answers. Okay, you are doing better than my residents. Okay, what's next? Okay, let's continue with our agenda. We have a very interesting program. Right now we will have our good friend Luis Fernando Bustos that you all know. He was introduced by Dr. Henry Cohen as his partner, long-life partner, and he is his birthday today. Dr. Bustos will talk about a very important topic, and we had a question from Dr. Cáceres from Honduras, and now we will give answers about the gut-brain axis. Thank you, Jaime. As I've heard many times, happy birthday, I couldn't leave this place, so I'm no longer 18 years anymore. So I needed to be here because I would be celebrating my birthday. So let's start this part that you see. This will be a more relaxed part. Well, for this workshop, no more suit because it's hot weather. So let's see if we can have an interactive presentation, and we will do this with Jaime. Okay, this is closer to you. So let's talk about this brain-gut axis. And a few years ago, we've been giving more importance to the meaning of the gut-brain axis. And I remember the first works that we had at the end of 1980s, at the beginning of 1990s, where the Valdebrun group has been very important for Fernandez and other people, my good friend Fermin, who was working with them, and we started to talk about the brain receiving information from the gut depending on the physiological state and the presence of nutrients and the inflammatory activity. And I had the opportunity to work several years ago with Nick Reeve, who was one of the pioneers in the UK. And he was talking about this type of things. And he was using the term that when we are trying to express emotion, we use the digestive system. Is that we're referring to the digestive system when people have a sentimental thing, they say they have a knot in the stomach. They do not recall the heart. That would be more romantic, and the last part of the system would be different. So everything that means to the last part of the digestive tube, we won't be able to talk about it regarding soccer matches and soccer teams. So these answers are there, and this has a medical explanation that peripheral ways are more important than the main waves, that the things connecting the gut with the brain are peripheral. The digestive system was made to feel. That's why I was explaining you these emotions. And they come through nutrients, and what we know right now is what is happening with the inflammatory activity. And the brain modulates the physiology of the gut throughout the central and the nervous system, the enteric nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and the central nervous system that is sending information so we can produce a specific action of the digestive system. We have We modulate inflammatory activity through vagal inputs. Throughout the last years, we've had a new participant, and we have intestinal microbiotic in a two-way axis. And this question is that we were not imagining. And if I say Jaime, a partner in crime, when did you start thinking that this would be possible, that if microbiota could be part of this new axis? How many years ago we started thinking about it? So I'm supposed to be the president, right? When I started to get involved with probiotics with my friend Dr. Van den Plas, and then I've studied even more throughout the invitation I've had with the Biocodex. So I've had the opportunity with Claudia Ferreira, who had invited us, and I've gone deeper into the topic. And it's fascinating for everybody because it is very important for our children. So just considering the fact that a bacteria, a microorganism inside our gut, could produce a modification inside the central nervous system would be amazing. And it was even more complicated for an astronaut even considering it. And I think it's very interesting because the fundamental concept of its story is something that we all know, and it's stress. Let's have some example. 44-year-old lawyer that is suffering from abdominal cramping pain associated with watery diarrhea for the past 15 years. And she says those symptoms are exacerbated by stress when appearing in court. Or a med student suffering from diarrhea while preparing his medical finals. Or Hector, it is a male guinea pig placed on a metal platform with its paws tied. It is fast. He's been feasting for 2 hours at a 4-grade room, and we compare it with another guinea pig of the same age and weight, left in its cage at room temperature with ad libitum access to food and water. So what do we have here? Do you have an idea of this slide? I always failed in psychological interpretations. This is Hector's feces, and these are Hector's feces of the other animals. So what does it mean? Imagine Dr. Warden talking about feces. Okay, so what we have here is that emotional stress is clearly producing variations in the physiology of the digestive tract, and it is not only related to that if a person is under stress, daily stress, but stress is something that all living things have with a certain stimulus. There are certain modifications produced inside the digestive tract. So how can we relate it with the microbiota and the different works that have been done? And they are for the McMaster's University, and with the people from Argentina. I need to be proud of Elena Berdu, who is a doctor who works in McMaster's, and her husband, who is not Argentina, but maybe he could have some sort of Argentinian genes. Dr. Persik, they started to work a lot on this topic, and with the different presentations we had in the morning, we have an evidence of the influence of gut microbiota on brain behavior. There are different works on germ-free. What happens with antibiotics or diet-induced disturbance? What about microbiota transplantations? And what happens when we use probiotics? So we started to study this type of research protocols based on these concepts. So let's try to see the works done by McMaster's, where they had behavioral tests in mice, and they were using two methods. The step-down test, that is latency, a rat takes to leap and go down, and the time in the light box or the dark box. And when we were evaluating and we see a decrease, then we see animals have an anxious type behavior. And what we did was to study this type of mice, what could happen when we're doing a maternal separation. And these things we do with experiments in animals, then we separate the rat from the mother, and it's called mother separation. So it seems that when there is a mother separation, there is an activation of this hypophysis hypothalamus axis, and there is an anxious depression-like behavior after 8 weeks. So the rat separated from the mother 3 hours a day on day 27, weaning on day 28, and study of psychological behavior and microbiota after 8 or 9 weeks. This would be the protocol. And we saw that in mice separated from the mother, they have an anxiety depression behavior 8 weeks later. And this is a control, and these are the mice that were separated from the mother. The same thing happens with step-down latency, or the time they will be inside a white or dark box. Now, what happens when we are doing the hypophysis hypothalamus axis? And to summarize how does it work, here we have the fundamental element in this story, that is CRF, that is the corticotrophin liberating agent that is inside the brain. To do an explanation, if we are very happy listening to my presentation, I don't know if some of you are very happy, then doors open, and then people with some gun machines are coming to the room. Then we will have a stimulus inside our central nervous system, releasing the corticotrophin element that will release corticotrophin, and then it will release cortisol. This is the acute system on stress, and when the stimulus is ended, then we will have a negative feedback, and then we will cut the release of the substance, trying to balance it again. So what we see here is that mice that were separated from the mother, the corticosterone levels are different from the ones that stayed with their mother. But if we evaluated corticosterone levels in germ-free mice and normal mice, there is no significant difference. So the central stimulus for corticotrophin would be the same. And the same thing happens when there is acetylcholine release from the enteric nervous system. That would be the final step to produce the stimulus. Now, they said microbiota is altered in maternally separated mice. We clearly see there's a different concentration, and only 55 to 70% would be similar to control mice. Now, depending on the behavior, we have microbiota. It seems that in germ-free mice, there are not important division, so the stimulus would be the same, but we still don't know the action produced on the digestive tract would be the same, or what could be produced from the digestive tract going through the central nervous system would be produced as a modification. So what they did was the germ-free mouse, they have a mother separation, then try to see anxiety and depression compared to this. So what could be the anxiety-like behavior observed in germ-free mice that no modification is produced compared to the ones that were not germ-free mice? So we could restore behavioral changes by reverting these germ-free mice. And as you can see, we have a different action when we are colonizing these mice. We are selecting a different microbiota compared to control mice. So colonizations of germ-free mice restore anxiety-type behavior. So when we didn't have germ-free mice, this modification is not produced compared to the ones that were produced in normal mice. And if we recolonize these mice, the germ-free mice, then we have the previous behavior. So What this type of work demonstrates is that the early age stress model reflects two-way interactions in the brain-gut axis microbiota, producing early age stress, changing in colon physiology, alteration in the bacterial habitat, and alter microbial compositions that could have an effect on the brain, and this modification axis could be produced that it could be highly related to the questions that were done regarding if microbiota could have any modification. And I think that science will demonstrate that many of it has to do with the inflammatory response of the organism. Many of the central nervous system diseases have to do with an inflammatory response, and certain symptoms are related to it. So, the well-being state produces a functional access, normal behavior, normal nociception. On the other side, stress will produce dysfunctional access, altered behavior, increased pain perception too. The same way, well-being has balanced microbiota, normal gut function, balanced immune system, normal gut morphology, what we call homeostasis. On the other side, dysbiosis is producing gut dysfunction, low-grade inflammation, tissue damage, and the presence of the disease. So, takeaway, acute and chronic stress may alter gut microenvironment, producing dysbiotic microbiota, leading to anxious, depressive states. The exact pathways and mediators have not been completely elucidated, and previous evidence is available showing that bacteria can modulate behavior through action on the enteric nervous system. It is possible that in the future, microbiota modulation using probiotics and/or symbiotics might be more important in treating diseases such as IBS, with anxiety, comorbidity, and depression. Thank you very much. I would like to make a comment regarding what the Dr. Warner said in pediatrics, that is the presence of amino acids that are essential, and we do not have this essential amino acid produced by bacteria, talking about different of them, then this axis will not work, because tryptophan is a precursor of serotonin, and it is released, as you well presented it, interchromal cells for the intestine, and then it goes to the central nervous system to modulate our mood. Now, the doctor and his presentation is very happy because he's a great speaker. So you could realize how this is modulating through the release of serotonin, and I don't know if Dr. Gardner would like to say something about it, but as a pediatrician, I'm very interested in having a well-fed child, and if I have essential amino acids, then the microbiota will have the proper functions. Can we continue? Yes, we have questions here. Not just from the audience, but we can have a questioner here so you could start answering them. Okay, question number 1. And the maternally separated mouse model, these may give rise to a better connection in the gut-brain axis. Number 2, an anxiety, depression-like behavior after 8 weeks. Suppression of cortisol release, or germ-free mice. So you're paying attention to the presentation. You were a great speaker, doctor. I say that this type of exam is just our own exam to see if the audience was paying attention. So what we're stating is stress produced by mother separation, and it is producing this anxiety depression behavior that could be evaluated 8 weeks later. Now let's go to the next question. Both acute and chronic stress may alter the gut microenvironment, resulting in a microbiota being symbiotic, eubiotic, dysbiotic, or absent. Okay, let's see the results. Listo. 84%. Okay, very good. So it is very interesting to see the concept of the different words, and I think there's something that is fundamental for dysbiosis and eubiosis that might be related to diversity, to stability, and these were the concepts that we were mentioning this morning. And it would be more important to know if the patient we have and we would like to treat this patient has a microbiota, is eubiotic or dysbiotic. Symbiotic when they have a real situation. Hopefully we have a very important symbiosis between the host and bacteria, and absent, well, if we do it that way, then we've done something wonderful, or we've done a cocktail of antibiotics to destroy the microbiota. Okay, let's go to the following question, and I think this would be the most difficult question of all. What was the name of the guinea pig?
Siguen al baño. ¿Sí? Nunca se pudo retirar del baño. Hace 100%. Venga. Como el héroe de Atenas, lucha. Aquiles con René. 81, mira.
So I think Jorge would be nice, and I wanted to strengthen their own name because some of the attendees are Jorge. So Hector, my friend Hector, who is with me in different presentations for many years. So any other question, or we can continue with the following speakers. And unbalanced gut-brain axis may result in balanced microbiota, normal gut function, low-grade inflammation, normal intestinal morphology, they're just expecting to see the soccer match. So the only people who could be nervous are the people on the left and people from Colombia on this side. So we have here the Colombian shirt. So we have a doctor with the soccer match shirt. So people from Colombia cannot do that. The only thing is that they show their hand like this. People from Colombia know that. So we have another shirt from Colombia. No, Uruguay is out. They were eliminated. They are eliminated. So I will defend my friend Cohen. So they are the champions right now. Okay, let's see. 92% chose low-grade inflammation. And we mentioned that this low-grade inflammation is produced in an unbalanced brain gut axis. And this low-grade inflammation is increasing an inflammatory response. A few years ago, a very interesting document was published that said that if we do anastomosis and C-sections in a rat and then it is an infraction, then there is a stress reaction. And we saw that the mouse had a depression state. So we were evaluating apoptosis levels in the brain, and if we had an antidepressant medication, then there was a modification of the apoptosis, and if we all gave a probiotic, it was a modification in depression. So the action we can have with actions that go on the central nervous system in an indirect way, they can go through serotonin, then we can try to achieve it the same way. So questions from the audience? Yes? Questions from the audience, please? The topic, it's very interesting. It's something we do every day, the gut-brain axis. Remember that as gastroenterologists, we have the power of the intestinal tract with very independent programs, and everything you have to do here is our power, and the microbiota power is a complement, though we are the two ways together. Dr. Luis Felipe Cabrera, could you please turn off the lights? Okay, Dr. Luis Felipe Cabrera from Colombia. With everything you've mentioned, and then you ratified, what do you think that could be the best donor for the fecal elements? Would be the mother? No, because it is not good enough, although in specific situations. There is no genetic element in this. It doesn't have to do with the characteristic in microbiota, and if you have used donors from family elements, but it has to do more with trust that it is not producing any problem. What you need to take home is about a fecal transplant. That it's still in very early stages. Please don't talk about fecal transplant, and I think Dr. Warner agrees with what I'm saying. Okay, I have the same suggestion. One thing would be to state a research project on this topic when we think there is a complete clinical situation and we could have some sort of improvement. When we are designing a well-controlled protocol, then we have an ethical committee that will review this protocol, and then we can start this research, and we would like to obtain some sort of knowledge out of this study. So with this situation, I think fecal transplant would still need a lot of work to do because it is helping us to know if dysbiosis could be a cause or a consequence. They could cause a disease, but if with a transplant you can reverse it, then we are understanding that this bacteria could be doing a function that we didn't take into account before. So it is valid as a research topic, but it implies certain risks that we don't know, and I don't think it would be wise to tell. Ivan was saying that he has read about transplantations in the kitchen because there's a webpage in the U.S. They are saying that you can taking bacteria from your relatives in the kitchen, and this would be like a risk. And as people have access to this information, then my suggestion would be when we're talking about a research topic, then we need to design a protocol, a controlled one. Then we need to have research and approval from an ethical committee, and then we could start researching this topic. Francisco, now that you have the microphone, sometimes could be useful to do metabolites from the bacteria as we've used them from a short chain, or for inflammatory disease that we have a direct action from one product, and then we're not using microbiota, but we're using something specific that could be a therapeutic element. Maybe in a long term, in the future, we would have information from specific metabolites, and then it's something sure we're not at risk of information from specific bacteria. In some centers, they're working on mixing well-purified bacteria that have their own genotype and for Crohn's disease, for example. So this is different. Okay, today, doing a transplantation, studying the microbiota of the mother, thinking about doing transplantation of the father, if we know if he really is the father, but if we're positively thinking, as you mentioned, Dr. Warner, it is very difficult to study the whole microbiota, one virus or the other. So the key message here would be to have a research protocol approved by an ethical committee. 10 more minutes with Dr. Bustos. Any other question? People from Nicaragua, questions? People from El Salvador, questions? What happens with Chile? Good afternoon. I have a question. We've mentioned, could you please say your name? Dr. Jorge Vasquez from Morelia. Good afternoon. Now that we are talking about what we had in the morning, and in adults we have immune state in different vaccines, how could we use prophylaxis of using in adult patients Saccharomyces after a 5 days or 7-day treatment? Can we use this as a prophylaxis? And some of the transfusion from microflora, there should be a study protocol. Then we need to check there are no pathogens, and the samples are from the whole family, because in theory, it's the same flora the child or the adult patient would have. And they've seen in pseudomembrane colitis when there is no action from antibiotics. So those are the only specific cases where they're using it. And the main question is, can we use it as a prophylaxis? Because in Saccharomyces boulardii, we're able to get it in some formulas. So in order to decrease infections, can we use it, or do you think it would be useful? Could it work? Yeah. The response with this are degree of evidence. And according to my knowledge, there is no degree of evidence that could demonstrate it. So, but it doesn't mean that we cannot do any differentiation between what we mentioned before, eubiosis or dysbiosis. We could have the fantasy of using probiotics in a prophylactic way could help us to have a more stable microbiota, and we cannot answer that question right now. There are some works that have been published by Dr. Ekani, who works with obesity, and there's a work with Saccharomyces boulardii in mice, where we have the characteristic for eubiosis than dysbiosis. So this does not have a clinical translation, and this is the situation we have right now. Microphone, please. I don't know if this could be useful. There are certain probiotics that have been tested to improve response to vaccine. We have several studies about it, and we have some studies with Saccharomyces boulardii, but there are different probiotics and some lactobacilli that have been studied, and a product by Danone where they've administered in vaccine periods, and the response to vaccine is better. Some of these studies are from the 1990s, so we could improve response to vaccine using certain probiotics that have been used for this purpose. I don't know, Saccharomyces boulardii could be two. Para mejorar la respuesta a las vacunas. I would like to make a comment. In Mexico, we say that probiotics are not just like the best response for everything. We need to know how to use them, and we need to rationalize them. That's very important, because if we think that we can use their probiotics to solve everything, we are wrong. They have a clear indication. I've said every bug has its own niche, so we need to use the right probiotic for the right purpose. It's clear that Saccharomyces boulardii, with the presentation from Dr. Van den Plas, is just to prevent diarrhea, acute diarrhea, acute gastroenteritis. So we need to limit to clear and precise instructions about it. That would be my suggestion. Good afternoon, Nelson Garcia from Paraguay. I need to tell our people who forgot Paraguay, but we will be the champions from the soccer cup. Thank you. Okay, I would say something else. How many technicians do we have? Almost every team has an Argentina technician. Okay. One question. Two questions. What can you say about newborns to foster the beginning of microbiota that is formed? And from the previous question, I wanted to ask you, what can you say for control crying from a newborn? And some gastroenterologists, they say that it's an allergic colitis, but we have different cases. So what can we define as a gut pain? And if we go back to colic, so it's the cause of coolant and idiopathic crying. So as a pediatrician, we need to identify the cause of the crying of the baby, as could be allergic to cow milk, or because there is anyone eating that baby, because of many reasons. So we need to find the cause before we prescribe a medication. We are also talking about a lactobacilli that could fix it, according to my experience, in children with allergy to cow milk protein. If I give them that component, then they get worse because it's made from human milk. So it is worsening the problem. So we need to be careful on the decisions we make. We need to think about what we're doing. Any other question? Yes, one question, Fernando was from Argentina. Patients with an irritated colon are more frequent when they start school, and we have a chronic pathology where we use probiotics as an aid to the treatment. Then we're using, according to our country, a certain probiotic, and we repeat the doses and the probiotic. Is there any word about alternating probiotics? Maybe I could start treating the patient with Saccharomyces boulardii, or eventually then change with Bacillus clausii or another one, or use the unique therapy with a single probiotic according to efficacy. This is a very good question. I was talking about the newborn calling, who's less than 6 months old, and an irritated colon. So I just give him the problem, so to see if he could solve this problem. Well, in irritated colon, we have stated this problem that could be the direct representation. Evidence says about this irritated gut, and probiotics are low. There is a work, the best that but it's in adults, where Dr. Emo Quigley then he had a study with a probiotic that is not sold in Argentina, and I think it's not sold in Latin America, where it was demonstrated that it could have some sort of effect on irritated gut with a serious control work. Most of the other products that are used for irritated gut do not have an intense evidence, strong evidence, but we think that when we use probiotics could be useful, but unfortunately we do not have enough evidence to support this fact. And moreover, in pediatrics, there are different wards where we see that certain symptoms decrease, individual pain could decrease in an individual way. But with control wards where the whole syndrome disappears except from the ward with Bifidobacterium infantis, there is no absolute evidence about it. We would like to do something about it, and in the future we will develop additional works trying to evaluate it. Just one more minute, and I would like to raise your hand if you vote for Argentina. Nobody? Okay, now raise your hand if you vote for Colombia. Good. We have the same situation. Nobody loves us. 44 seconds. Last question. Okay. Microphone here, please. I'm from Venezuela. I'm a pediatrician gastroenterologist. Now, considering that mother milk is an important source for the immunological system for the first 6 months, but after 6 months, the gut microbiota is responsible for that microbiota of immunoglobulin. There are many patients that we have some sort of allergies or intolerance, and trying to find in gastrointestinal factors or respiratory disease with immunoglobulin deficit are related. So what would be the level of evidence or the use of probiotics in modulating the immunoglobulin deficit? If there is an ideal probiotic, how long should we use it to try to modulate it? Excellent question and comment, but I think we need to support on our friend Dr. Van den Plas. According to my knowledge, there is a study that hasn't been well evaluated from Dr. Canani with Lactobacillus gigi-rhamnosus. Then we induce early tolerance through the mechanism presented by Dr. Warner for virgin lymphocyte. Then we stimulate T regulators. So we have an apparent response that could be good. The response of IgA has other additional effects. I don't know if anybody else would like to make a comment.
Un micrófono, sí.
Micrófono. You want to say something about how to induce tolerance, about the
Well, the fact is,
the paper of Canani?
yes, the fact is that it is an open study where parents and doctors knew very well which infant was receiving which formula. So it's an indication at this moment that there might be something happen, but we need a randomized controlled trial to confirm that. And I know that the trial is actually running. So in 1 year or so, we will have an answer if the addition of the probiotic really improves the acquisition of tolerance or not.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Dr. Van den Plas.
Now, the session will be moderated by the Vice President, Dr. Aldo Maru, and now we will have Dr. Francisco Guar from Spain, and the topic is microbiota and related disorders.